everyone. My name is Jin-Oh. I'm a robotics professor at Carnegie Mellon University. Today I'm going to talk about robot intelligence. Artificial intelligence, in short AI, used to be a term used by AI researchers only. But nowadays, everyone knows AI. Everyone uses AI. So one might be wondering where robot intelligence is. So today, I hope to explain snippets of where the state of the art in robotics is to you. So robotics, in short, is problem solving, but in a real life. So the real life means it deals with the uncertainty in the environment and in the task and interacting with the humans and everything. So my problem domain, the main domain I used to work are mostly on navigation problems, like ground navigation, aviation, underground. And I recently started using art also as a problem domain. And people may be wondering what the connections are, but essentially these are all the same problems. So in robotics, the difficulty comes from dealing with the various types of uncertainty in the problem. And in that sense, figuring out how to navigate from one place to another or painting something there to share the common technical challenge. How you would communicate what's inside your brain to another agent. You want to copy your brain and just give it to another agent, but it's impossible. So what do we use? So
Talking? Talking or typing?
Typing? Yes. Typing
Showing?
is, yeah.
I would show a picture?
Yeah, showing a picture. Right?
Yeah, I would show it schematics for the boat that I wanted to paint.
That's excellent.
Maybe I will use another AI.
That's
Maybe understand
another
the
great
speaking
way
or
too.
writing, and then it translate to the robots.
Yes,
Maybe.
you are all excellent. So we use language a lot. I describe in two different ways. So texting, young people prefer texting over like voice call. Why?
Easier for us or more convenient for
Easier,
us?
and I think this is a theory. You can hide your emotion. So you can use emoji to fake your emotion, like LOL and like smiley face without smiling. Okay, so using text, it's very hard to know what emotion the other person is having. It's actually less information than voice call. Using voice call, you sometimes want to save that part because you don't want to reveal too much. Okay, but at the same time, it's a richer information. So you can convey much more information through speech. And then drawing, so like the breadth. So you can show, sketch, or your idea in some sort of a visualization so that the final output, maybe much more detailed one, can be made based on your skeleton idea, which is central, right? And then sometimes you point to an example, okay, like give me something like this. So you can share your photo, other things. And this list can grow. So there are many different ways for us to communicate our ideas with other agents, which happen to be robots today. So this is, in technical term, this is called planning with abstract goals. So when we use language, it's a very abstract, but somehow we fill that gap again. For the cleaning robot, we just tell probably, okay, clean my room. What does that mean? Okay, there's so many details that we are not really telling the robot. Okay, and cook something for me. Okay, that's very, very abstract. But humans just fill that gap with some creativity, imagination, guesses, and that the human or the other agent knows more about you, then their prediction will better match with what you want. In a way, that's what we want to also accomplish as researchers. In addition to sense, plan, act, now we have spatial intelligence and then also creativity or imagination. So something that fills that gap with the different interpretation, but our goal is to align these with whoever gave this comment. Not just, okay, I like this. okay, the robot's goal, but it has to be aligned. Okay. So the first part is to study robotics problems. So I'm a roboticist, and I believe art provides a really great field, playground for robotics research. Okay. So let's first look at what the robotics problem is. So you have heard AI was built on this gigantic data a lot, right? So people are familiar with that data-driven paradigm or data-driven approaches. Have you played any sports when you're young?
I used to figure skate.
Wow, that's amazing. So that's a very, very difficult thing.
Right.
So if you watch a lot of figure skating videos, do you think you can learn a lot, like the basic?
Well, watching is important, but also more important is actually doing it, practicing, right?
Exactly. So anything that requires a physical motion requires some practicing. So it's a kind of the same kind of analogy. So robots need a practice field, but robot is doing things in the real world. If we let the robot just run around in the real world, drive autonomously on the road to learn how to drive safely, that's going to be a hazard, right? So it's going to be a disaster. So robotics researchers use simulation a lot. It's so convenient. You can just work on a computer, try out many things. But the difference is there is a huge gap. So there's no simulation environment that's even close to the real world. That's called the simulation to real gap. So in all the kinds of robotics problems, we have to deal with this, like how to reduce that sim to real gap. So in painting, for instance, this was an input image, so it's a photograph, and then the robot has these 6-color palette. And then if we use existing simulator, like built by a graphics idea, it looks amazing, right? So in the simulation, it looks really nice. But when we actually painted this, we got this, which is we still liked it. It's a kind of abstract painting, but it doesn't look like what it imagined in simulation. So our research was how to address this issue. So very quickly, this is how we represent a brush stroke action. So using 3 or 4 parameters to determine the shape. And then using these parameters, we can simulate if I take this action, what would be painted on canvas. So that is like simulating the brush strokes so that it can blend forward. The very first idea was using handcrafted rules. It worked a little bit better, but it didn't fully solve the problem. So the most successful one was using the real data. The big problem comes from the discrepancy because the simulation environment was developed by some other people. They have no idea what kind of robot I have. Okay, robot's constraints and how much freedom it has, what color it has access to. So it just simulates beautiful painting. Here's the painting. So robot, go ahead and paint. But we go to museum and look at amazing paintings. But that doesn't help me paint the same, okay? So figuring out what needs to be done is a robotics problem. And then using its own brush strokes to train a new simulation environment that knows what is feasible. Like using these kind of strokes, what can be painted? So that approach has been very successful. The results. So this was the very first one using somebody else's approach. And then this was the one that uses handcrafted rules. And then the final one was using its own brush strokes so that the simulation creates what our robot can paint. So based on that, it creates the goal that is much more feasible. So at this point, I'm going to kind of point out the difference between generative AI and generative robotics because we do the painting. So some people think, oh, isn't it the same as Midjourney? Midjourney produces much better, like high quality images. How is it different? So these are all in a digital space. You don't have to know the constraints. You can modify all the pixels the way you want. So you can produce really beautiful high fidelity pictures, but there is no way to turn that into the real world. So you can print it, but that's different from painting, so which requires a sequence of actions. Painting in the robotics world is really addressing the technical challenges that we are dealing with cooking or other types of difficult robotics problems, because it involves brush, which is a hair-like deformable material. Paint is liquid or also solid in between. So it is very difficult to predict and take actions. So how to incorporate these environmental constraints as well as robots, its own physical constraints. What if the robot has only a very tiny brush, or it cannot move freely, or the range of motion is very restricted. So understanding the constraints on both sides to produce a feasible plan, that's a robotics issue.
So if the simulation became so much more advanced that really match perfectly in the real world, so does that mean is all the problems of the robots face would be solved?
That's a great question. So let's say we have a perfect simulation environment, then it's very similar, but even in that space, it may still be difficult because, simulation ground is the advantage usually comes from the speed. So in the real world, like soccer play, practice, you can only do it maybe one game. But in simulation, you can do it like million times. So if the simulation environment is that fast, but that's hard. So that's a different technical challenges, how to make efficient simulation environment that is realistic and also very, very fast, especially if it involves object types like fabrics or anything that's not rigid. The current simulation environment is not as fast. So a lot of existing learning algorithm cannot be used because it's too slow. And also, very important part is the human. What does that mean? Like the AI, humans, need to be very, very human. So in self-driving, for instance, that is still difficult because all the cars are the objects, but the drivers are humans. So their decision-making is very hard to predict. So they're following the lane, but what if they just change their mind? So predicting human behavior is still very, very difficult. Having the perfect simulation environment, if we can include humans and living the real life in a very sped up fashion, then it is possible, but I think that is really far in the future. Any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at these Renaissance paintings from a distance, they look amazing. And then you zoom in, you zoom in. In this small, tiny window is another painting.
Yes.
The representation you showed is very large brushstrokes. To suggest it could even come close to copying like painting at that level, I mean, it seems almost impossible.
Yeah, so I mean, these days you need to be careful, like almost impossible, because some things that I thought that wouldn't happen in my lifetime are actually happening. So we never know, but still, I think it's a way much harder problem than language models. So this is kind of a little bit of an explanation. So in the data representation space, so language is a huge space. It's very, very difficult field. But if you look at the format of the data, it's token, 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 token. There can be different languages, but format is the same. It's a token, 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 token. So collecting data that's large enough to train a good model was possible. So that makes sense. And image, same thing. Pixel, 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 and then we only use this rectangular shape images. So the representation of the data is universal. It's a one format. But for robotics training, it's very hard to define what that token is. So many people are defining, okay, this must be the token for robotics like actions. But still, it's a lot of research is ongoing in that field.
So basically, so many has been achieved by robots, but still, so many things to achieve in the
Yes,
future. right?
it's
To go.
hard, but it's progressing really fast. So let me show you one other example how I connect art and robotics to two very different fields. And then this first part it illustrates the very robotics research. So in this research, my PhD student is working on proprioceptive sensing and robotics manipulation of these deformable objects. Hair, for instance, is a very, very difficult object to manipulate. And also, where is the head? It's very near to your brain, like the most important part of a human. So it is very nerve-wracking part, but still there is a need for this type of research. So you can see the finger is designed using a silicone, very soft material, and inside is a hollow. And inside you can embed small sensors. So you can either see how its own body deforms through camera sensing, or you can listen to the sound. You know, there's a sound of cracking or very, very small, very low frequency sound, but it can use that sound to understand how its own body deforms and also where it's touching or where other agents are touching its body. So we use that idea to communicate with other people. So this was done by a designer, the inflatable. So you can kind of imagine a larger version of these fingers. So the fingers were made into a large soft robot that people can interact with. So, by the way, have you seen a robot that can touch you? There is no existing robot system, or very few, if I am not aware of, very few that are allowed to even get close to humans. If the robot is making a contact with the human, it's called collision. So you get penalized. But we want to develop the robot that can safely interact with the people, and then people can also feel safe around the robot. So this was a showcase example. And this robot has internal proprioception, so we want to use it. So in this research, we did proprioceptive sensing using different types of the device. First one is through vision. So inside the robot, we can have a small camera sensing to visually see how its own body deforms. As you can see in this example, these are called the key points. So these were installed inside the finger. And then based on how these key points changes, you can estimate how its own finger changes, the whole shape, and then also estimate the context. We can do the same using microphones, embedding like a very tiny microphones inside the finger to listen and then process that signal to estimate its own body shape changes and also contact surface. And then this one is a art installation version of this project to send our message. So when we are working on AI and robotics system, I want to make the system that's transparent and explainable. So explainability is a kind of a property that we want to promote as well. In this project, we collaborated with the undergrad students who build really big inflatables. And those inflatables are not robots, but we turn them into a giant robot and a small robot. So inside, you see a small soft robot, and this one has a proprioceptive sensing. So inside, it has a camera. So when person is interacting with the small robot, then the robot knows where the user is touching, and then you will see the outer layer responds. So the message here is I want the user to have the feeling that you're interacting from outside the robot, but you suddenly realize that you are also inside that robot. So the message is our research has this goal that we aim to develop systems such that the user kind of have that kind of a feeling. So you are outside the robot, obviously, but you feel like you are inside so that you fully understand what the robot is doing. So those were two examples of how I make the connection between art and robotics. So hopefully I convinced you a little bit. The question, like, why do we still use art for domain? And also, do we need robots that have creativity? And to answer that question, in Palau Island, they didn't have the letter system. So to pass their beautiful fairy tales and stories, what they do is carve wood. So the wood carving is their way to preserve those beautiful stories. But sadly, the masters who can actually do the wood carving are aging. And young people don't want to do that anymore because it's a hard labor. So they reached out to me to see if there's any robotics solution to help them to continue that. So robotics is the one that actually changes the environment and actually taking actions to assist the people. And then especially in these fields that are dying out. And also, I'm an old generation. I never had the smartphones or even computers while I grew up. And I really cherish those moments. I really interacted with the earth, plants, nature. That was very important in my or like development and everything. But whenever I see little young children just watching YouTube on smartphones all the time, I don't feel comfortable. Maybe that's still helpful to them too, but I want to revive the old thing. So I want to just promote this handmade stuff or, using your hand to interact with the real world and also interact with the real people instead of texting only. So our research aims to promote human values. So we wanted to invite the user to the creative process more because the very first one was user just gives what they want only at the beginning. And we wanted the users to also continue interliving. So this is a version where people can take turns. And also art, whenever I say the word art, people imagine museum. So art suddenly became something that you can only see when you go to museums. But in my definition, art is for everyone because it's the way to express your ideas. And it doesn't have to be like super beautiful as long as it carries your message or your experience, many things. The art is not just creating something that's visually pleasing. It's sending a message about our world, what's going on in human society, human drama, everything about humans. Without that, what's the meaning of that art that's created by a system? So if you still like it, that may be a small field or genre, but I don't think it'll be replacing the entire human art category because the message or this expression is central in the arts. These are some of the examples of our messages. So we did Carnegie Mellon is in Pittsburgh, so we do a lot of paintings about Pittsburgh and also robots. So all kinds of different messages done by people's ideas. All right, so I want to just take this opportunity to ask this question. So how would you use technology to encourage people to do more creative activities and to promote creativity and other types of human values, like what matters to us? So we want to use robotics and AI technologies to help us to be a better human. So art is also self-expression, meaning we express our ideas. Artists like Picasso did a lot of paintings about his thoughts about war, Spanish War, and that became his masterpiece. So we can use art as a medium, and also the robotics can help people to continue using art and to express ideas. I love art and paintings, but I'm not a good painter, but now I can paint my ideas using Frida as a tool. So today, I briefly talked about the snippets or touched the surface of what robotics challenges are and how it's different from AI and generative AI. Hopefully it answered some of your questions. The message and also the question I'd like to ask you at the end is, how would you use these technologies to help us become better humans? Because technologies are tools that we develop, and it's up to the users how you use those tools to make our world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jaekyung Kim.
Giving up.
I just sleep right away.
No math, no the future. Why math is the language of life. It can improve the survival rate of the patients.
Well, I never knew that math could be used to study life.
So what happens when math meets with AI? Ready? Yes.